On this slide, we can see an example of a storyline overview. When developing a story, it's important to map out the various components that make up the story. We can use this guide throughout the writing process to ensure that we have a compelling story that is not only easy to follow, but also complex and deep with substance. With storyboarding, there are key elements that make up the story. We need to introduce the audience to the building blocks of the cause. Who are the main actors? What world do they live in? And what is it that they're confronted with? In Skyfall, we start with the exposition. This is the introduction to the protagonists, the setting, and their point of view. We are immediately introduced to Kyra and the world that she lives in. We see her satire and frustration regarding the dwindling human existence. We also find out that she's angry with the mysterious death of her father and has no real answers. We then move into the enticing action, the event that introduces the protagonist to their conflict. In Skyfall, storms and earthquakes are appearing more frequently, and this troubles Kyra. She begins to wonder to herself if this is actually the end of the world. As a massive storm almost encompasses Kyra and Wap, they are forced into a small village to seek shelter. While in the broken down house, they hear strange voices coming from the lower level. This is odd to her because, as most places in Skyfall, they are abandoned. As she listens carefully, she hears a mischievous plan that involves her dead father's laboratory. This drives her to gather her friends and see for herself what really is going on. While at the lab, she discovers her father was working on a project that may save the world. While shocked with the new findings of her father, she and her group are confronted by another group that's looking for something that will further their evil plan. We then move into the rising action, the sequence of events in which the protagonist fights with conflict. Throughout the story, Kara is faced with challenges, such as racism, chauvinism, inequity, doubt in herself, and the mysterious death of her father. Each of these have a moral decision that needs to be made. What the audience will do at that time is make a decision along with Kara that's either against or with her resolution. With the climax, we reach the pinnacle of our story. Towards the end of the story, Kyra is faced with the ultimate decision to either save the world and return to the state before Skyfall, or keep it the same and save her friends. If she does decide to save the world, she risks killing her mutated friends as the atmosphere is no longer mutated. We then reach the resolution. Knowing only a few key points, Kara makes the decision and decides to return the world to the state before Skyfall. It was one of the hardest decisions she ever had to make. We then reach the falling action. As Kara's thoughts weigh heavily on her soul, she knows that she may have sealed the fate of her friends. Her friends are in disbelief and distance themselves from her as they're uncertain of their own fate. Kara is now alone, left alone during a time that she needed support the most. We then reach the conclusion of her story as Kara suffers from her decision. She knows at her heart that it was the right decision to make. Everything that she had has changed. The world lies silent. No storms, no earthquakes, no movement. There are no signs of any improvements except that things are not getting any worse. The only thing left to do is wait alone and trust that the work of her father, that she hardly knew, was correct. With any great story, a strong plot engages the audience. In Skyfall, the plot of the story is that leaders are not always liked. They must make the tough decisions that may not be the popular one. The challenges that they face are just like anyone else. No one is perfect, and we all make mistakes. But it's the people that take the risks that lead to new worlds and possibilities. Kara is just a normal young girl who was thrown into a situation that was forced her to make decisions that she'd rather not make. The story attempts to challenge the audience with decisions and that we often hope that we do not have to make ourselves. What are morals if not for the betterment of society? No one should ever feel disadvantaged because of difference in race, creed, or stature. Leaders are the ones who can make the choices others won't. They are the ones that start the transformation for a better world. Let's now take a look at the major scenes of the story. We'll also have the supporting context for each scene. As we start our story, we are introduced to the current state of the world and its history to date. We are also introduced to the main characters of our story, Kyra and Wap. The supporting context is that we are trying to set up the theme of the environment. We also get to see some of Kiara's personality in satire. We also see Wap's literal personality. In scene 2, Kiara and Wap take coverage from the storm. They soon find out that they're not alone in the house. They hear a plan that involves Kiara's dead father's lab. Here we are introduced to the main interest of our driving cause. Kiara wants to know what's going on, and so does the audience. In scene 3, as Kiara and Wap leave the building, they stop in the village where they live. The audience is introduced to a new character called Ellie. Kiara convinces Ellie to join them on their adventure, and on their way out of town, they encountered their first scene of racism. Here we build on the importance of the cause by bringing in more people. We are also shown that Kiara is a natural leader of the group. In scene 4, at the lab, they find out that Kiara's father was much more than she knew. She feels a bit of resentment towards him for living in secret. Her anger begins to build. Here we are introduced to Kiara's inner struggle with her father and his mysterious death. His death and Kiara's relationship of her father provides a deep connection to the audience. In scene 5, while in the lab, Kiara and her group are confronted by a not-so-friendly group of thugs. They must now run for their lives. Here we are finally exposed in a clear view to the opposition. We are shown that they are evil and reckless, and the audience should fear these people. In scene 6, before leaving the lab, they hide in one of the rooms planning their escape. This is where they're introduced to Boz. The context for this scene is that the audience is finally introduced to Boz. This robot was designed by Kiara's father to deliver the Lazarus Cube to the core. He is the comic relief of the group, but is unknowingly so. In scene 7, with their new friend, they run into the nearby Worgon caves, which is extremely dangerous, but is really the only option they have. Here we're introduced to the vicious Worgons. They are known as savage dogs that are to be avoided at all costs. They live in a maze of tunnels. In this scene, we are introducing another element of danger that may actually prove valuable later on in the story. In scene 8, they run fast and deep into the maze of tunnels to hide from the pursuit. Here we have an action scene where the audience gets to follow along in fear of the unknown. We know that these caves mean sure death, but what other option do they have? In scene 9, while in the caves, our storyline splits. Kiara and her friends have a separate journey where they save the dreaded Worgons from death. In doing so, they unknowingly make an ally. Here we see Kiara's compassion for animals that have been stereotyped as savage beasts. She determines that they're just like anything else in the world, just trying to survive. In scene 10, as they make their way out of the cave, they begin their main adventure. They must now find the Lazarus Cube and save the world. They know that they must go to Brittany and find the location of the Lazarus Cube. Here's the point in the story where the team feels good about what they have done, helping the Worgons. They now feel energized and ready to brave the adventure. Kara knows that whatever this box is, it must be very important. She also hopes to find out more about her father's death in the process. In scene 11, they search a nearby city of Brittany for clues. They happen to stumble across an old robot that cryptically provides the location of the cube. They learn about the history of the cube as well. In this scene, Kara finds out that her father was everywhere. He hid in plain sight. He was a master of interconnection of systems and secretive operations. She was angry with her father, but also knew that he was trying to fix the world. In scene 12, after leaving Brittany, they travel to a remote location between Firestorm Marsh and Felltree Forest. They find the Lazarus Cube hidden in a mysterious ruin. However, it's a puzzle they better not get wrong. With this scene, as they reach the secret location, the audience wants to join along in the treasure hunt. There is a complex puzzle to solve in order to open a door. At this point, we add a bit of danger to the story, because with 3 wrong answers, the building will explode. In scene 13, As they leave the ruin, they are confronted by Shriek, one of Mal'Thanis' henchmen. With speed and agility they have never seen before, Shriek steals the box from them and takes off before they can react. This is the first time we see Shriek. He is fast and aggressive. We see that the team is also not yet organized and lose the box to Shriek. This is where Kara knows that she needs to take advantage and stop him. In scene 14, the group chases Shriek to Firestorm Marsh. Here they encounter another one of Mal'Thanis' henchmen, Titus, a large and powerful monstrosity. The odds are quickly stacking against them. While chasing Shriek, the team realizes that they are up against some serious odds. They see Titus and Shriek, and they know that they don't have the skills to beat them, so doubt sets in. In scene 15, WAP unexpectedly bursts into speed, and the group manages to steal the box back. However, they are forced down an old path that heads towards the village of Anuwaka, where they find refuge. In a magical moment and pure luck, we see one of the mutant's unknown abilities. WAP had no idea that she could run that fast. For the first time, they see the light at the end of the tunnel. They may be smaller and weaker, but unity will overcome. In scene 16, Shrek and Titus head back to their boss to report out. Kaira and her friends seek refuge in a village. Kaira also learns a valuable lesson that changes her outlook on a lot of things. At this point, we want the audience to have a rest after all the action. It's time to look at Kaira's inner thoughts and situation. In scene 17, while in the village, Kaira reflects on the current situation and begins to doubt herself. Here we see Kaira's mental state. She is realizing the world is bigger and more dangerous than what she has been exposed to. She suddenly feels like she won't be able to change the world's toxic paradigm. In scene 18, she also doesn't know who to believe in anymore. She becomes skeptical of everyone and everything. While in the village, she comes in contact with an old lady who becomes her mentor. She guides Kaira and helps her sort out her thoughts. She uses a metaphor of a beehive and their queen. The hive is nothing without the queen, and the queen is nothing without the bees. In scene 19, while in the village, Kaira and her group figure out from an old story from the tribe that they need to bring the Lazarus Cube to an old ruin on Hellfire Beach. Kaira listens to the old story and finds it ironic that the story relates almost identically to their cause. The story of a young girl becoming a god and changing the world as we know it. They named the island Nanil after the goddess that rules over the land. Here we have a narrative question. Is this story speaking of Kaira and we don't know? In scene 20, the group leaves Anuwaka through a small passage and travel to the drylands. While in the drylands, they meet all types of different creatures. This is where Kaira resolves her issues of chauvinism, equality, doubt in herself. With the lessons that Kaira picked up from the village, she uses her new understanding to navigate the drylands and Tiny Skull Outpost. While there, an eccentric cyborg points out that Kaira's respirator is special. Kaira doesn't completely understand because it was a gift from her father. Here we have another narrative question. What's so special about her respirator? Here we also make use of semiotics. What does the special filter represent? In scene 21, with great difficulty, they reach the ruins. Their hunch was right. They needed to bring the cube to this location, but they encounter Mal'Thanis and his minions. During their visit at Tiny Skull, someone overheard their conversation. This is an example of causality. The audience knew that this would cause trouble for our heroes. This person informed Mal'Thanis of their whereabouts, and our heroes would once again face Mal'Thanis. In scene 22, Mal'Thanis steals the box and returns home to the Winterlands, where he plans to use the box to complete the transformation and end humans forever. In this scene, we have some ironic examples that a device designed to save the world may in fact be the one that destroys it. We also have an example of emotional causality. What has made Mal'Thanis so angry? His anger of the world and humans cannot be measured. He will stop at nothing to finalize his plans. In scene 23, a favor from a friend that they made along the way in the drylands provides quick travel to the winterlands. When all hope is lost, we have an example of magic and miracles, faith and belief. Someone that is almost unknown in the story shows up and saves the day. Here's another example of a narrative question. Who is this person and why does he want to help? In scene 24, Carrier and her friends hatch a plan to steal back the Lazarus box and hide it until it's safe to use. In this scene, we have an example of voyeurism. The audience gets to hear almost all of the plan on how they plan to get the box back. The audience may agree that it is a good plan or disagree and wait for them to fail. In scene 25, after a hard battle with Malthanis, Kiera is put in a situation where she must now make the hardest decision of her young life. Here we have the pinnacle of the action scene and the story itself. We also provide a small break for the audience, as Kiera is presented with the ultimate decision. In scene 26, Boz and Wap are stuck on a platform that hangs high over molten lava. Ellie is unconscious lying at the feet of Titus, who's about to drop a huge boulder on her. And to top it off, Kara's father's AI brain is in the hands of Malthanis. In this scene, we provide a recount of the situation so that we can ensure the audience understands what's at risk. This builds on the attention of the scene, and the audience begins to play out different scenarios. We create narrative questions like, what would you do if you had to make the choice? In scene 27, Malthanis gives Kara a chance to save her friends and her father's AI by just simply handing over the Lazarus cube. Here, as the audience, we watch through Kara's eyes as she's presented with this ultimatum. This is another example of voyeurism. The severity of the situation can only be seen through her eyes. In scene 28, all hope is lost. Kara goes through all the options and internalizes her feelings of right and wrong. Save her friends, or destroy everything that she knows of the world. Here we have Kara coming to terms of her understanding. Who is she? What does she believe in? What does she consider as the right thing to do? At this point, the audience should be at the edge of their seat during her decisions. In scene 29, Kara makes the decision and decides to insert the special air breather into the Lazarus cube. This unknowingly creates a blinding light that stuns everyone except for her. This is the climax of the story. Kiera makes her decision, and we see the audience hang in the moment. All time is stopped, and they wait to see what happens. In scene 30, she takes this opportunity to save her friends and leave. However, by connecting the two objects, it set in motion a chain reaction that may actually fix the world. However, it may also seal the fate of all mutant life. At this point, we as the audience find out the semiotic symbol of the breather was. It was the key to everything. Kara's father entrusted her with the key to life. She now realizes how her father believed in her and gave her the strength to make the world's hardest decision. In scene 31, Kara and her friends return home to an uncertain fate. Her friends now cold shoulder her, and she's left alone to reflect on the choices that she made. We as the audience are coming down from the critical moment of Kara's decision. We are now presented with another narrative question. What happens next? Is everything going to be okay? What's going to happen to the mutants now that the world may return back to its old state? In scene 32, all Kara knows is that she made the best decision she could make. However, everything is just silent. There's no sign of storms, and there's no earthquakes. She has no idea if anything actually worked. At this point, we see Kiera's reflection. At the end of the story, we have an eerie silence in the world. The audience has a chance to reflect. on the things that brought us to this point. This leaves a question for a possible sequel. What happens now that everything is just still and Kiera is alone? Here we'll take a quick look at the visual storyboarding for the beginning of the story, Skyfall. We will set the scene and begin building the audience's relationship with Kira and Wap. We start by setting the visual. We'll show Earth in its old state when it was blue, and then compare it to its new state with a purple-red glow as toxins have taken over the environment. The story goes, this place had fresh air and bright blue skies. To be honest, I don't think I know what that color is. In this first scene, we have a connotation of Earth. When we see Earth, we associate it with life. However, we open the scene with Earth not as what we remember it, but changed. Something has changed our understanding of Earth. In the next scene, we set the visual. Show a closer view of the current state of the environment. Show haze, dark silhouettes, and desolation. The world has changed. It's in an apocalyptic state. A state that humans can't really live in. It has been like this for 150 years since the day of Skyfall. Skyfall refers to the day that everything changed. In the next scene, we set the visual. Show some of the creatures evolving before our eyes. Hint at the molecular changes. The atmosphere has changed, and so did every molecular structure of every living being. Humans are dying out, and in their place, animals and insects have rapidly evolved. Here we have an example of causality with mutations. Because of the changes in the atmosphere, we as the audience wonder what would happen to living beings. What would this change cause? In the next scene, we set the visual. Show a massive storm with toxic rain and electricity dwarfing a city. To make matters worse, the world's very foundation seems to be crumbling. Massive storms and earthquakes are occurring with more frequency. No one knows for certain how this will end. Next scene, we show a small group of humans walking through an area with new mutant families. Since Skyfall, what we knew of the sciences and biology we had to relearn. The chemical properties in the air have mutated everything. Insects and animals are human-like. They are social. They have families. And most importantly, they now talk. In the next scene, show a small group of mutants being harassed by humans. This is in stark contrast to the previous slide, with the humans being outnumbered to the mutants. It has taken a long time for humans to adopt the existence of these beings. Most now accept them as intellectual equals. Although there are some humans that believe it's an absolute abomination to associate with these creatures, especially the insect race. In the next scene, we set the visual. A landscape view of various broken down but still functional factories in the distance. In the midground, we can see ruins of buildings that people used to live in but are not suitable for living now. Rubble is everywhere, and in the foreground, we see the sun trying to poke through the clouds as to signify life is being choked out by the toxins. This was a place of human freedom, where the sun could kiss your skin and you could feel the warmth inside. But I only know this chaos. The sun won't be kissing me today. In this slide, we have causality. Life is being suffocated by the change. We see the current landscape, and it is desolate and struggling to stay alive. We also see that civilization exists, but not like it had before. In this scene, we establish the visual. We show Kiera looking at her hand in a latex suit. We show the background of the polluted environment out of focus. How did we get here? The planet is dying. The land around us is dying. Wow, I guess that means I'm dying too. Just wonderful. In this scene, we have an index sign, hazmat gloves. We see Kira's hand covered in a latex glove against a toxic background. This index is a causal relationship between the environment and the required protection. In the next scene, we establish the visual. From behind, Kiera is standing with Wap overlooking the city with a small town just before it. Well, I guess we better get moving, Wap. That storm really looks powerful. In the scene, reading significance, metaphor, we compare the two small girls that seem helpless against the brewing storm that is massive and powerful. How can two girls save the world? The next visual we establish, seeking shelter, Kira and Wap begin their descent down the hill towards a small village. Wap says, "We actually got here by..." Kira responds, "Ha, my smart little friend. It was a rhetorical question. If no one ever asks why, then we'll never know how. One day, we'll understand why, and we'll fix this problem." We establish an awareness, a hint of things to come. Kira provides a hint to the audience regarding the main plot of the entire story. One day, we'll understand why, and we'll fix the problem. In the next visual, Kira and Wap are walking into the town with a massive thunderstorm rolling in. "Let's hurry, Wap. This storm is going to catch us if we're not faster. I know your little legs can move faster than that." Again, awareness, a hint of things to come. Kira indicates at an ability that neither Wap or Kira knows yet. Later on in the story, Wap finds out that she can have uncontrollable bursts of speed. In this scene, we establish the visual. Kira and Wap make it to the town as the massive acidic and electrical storm reaches them. They take cover in one of the abandoned buildings. "Here, let's go into this one." In this next scene, we establish the visual. Kira is now safely in the building, but Wap, for some reason, is standing outside as the storm approaches. Kira, "Wap, what are you doing?" Wap, "It does seem like the storms are getting much more powerful." With this scene, we establish shock, a tense action moment. The audience is in shock as they see the storm approach. Kira quickly turns around and reaches for Wap. They watch with intensity as the scene unfolds. In this next scene, we establish the visual. Kira quickly grabs and pulls Wap into the safety of the building. "Get in here!" In the scene, we have dramatic irony. Although Wap is super smart, she stands in the path of a storm. The audience knows she will be harmed if it were not for Kira pulling her into the safety of the house. In this last scene, we establish the visual. The storm reaches full power and throws around debris and dust so thick that they can't see the building across the street. The storm is loud and forceful and mixed with electrical surges and very hot, caustic rain. Most living beings would be burned to death if it were not electrocuted. So we also have a narrative. What was Wap thinking? The audience catches their breath as they see that Wap is now safe. They innately ask themselves, what was she thinking standing out there in the storm? The hero's journey. Our hero Kara is a typical young girl growing up in a world of Skyfall. Throughout the story, we witness different challenges that test her abilities to lead. She's confronted with issues such as racism, chauvinism, inequity, doubt in herself, and the mysterious death of her father. How she handles each one of these challenges make up the building blocks of her character. She finds that her inner strength comes from trusting in others and her ethical belief that everyone is equal. She believes that everyone, no matter how small or how big, has something that they can offer towards a solution. Near the end of the story, we find that Kiera is faced with an ultimate decision between her personal wants and the needs of others. Even though her choice was not a popular one, she grew stronger and more mature because of it. However, for her, it is the hardest decision of her life. With the plot curve, we reach the intro. We begin the story with a dire decline in human existence. We, as the audience, wonder what happened. We are told that the world has changed dramatically, and we want to know why. We want to know more. The rise in curiosity. We are then introduced to the reason why the world has changed, and we want to know even more. what really happened behind the scenes. Next, we build the suspense. We begin to find out that there's much more to the story. We want to know who's at fault. What is their driving motivation? In the process, we also find out that there are others who know the reason and are trying to stop it. This group must work in secret, as a solution could be just as damaging as beneficial in the wrong hands. At this point, we provide the audience with the rest from the plot of a ruined world, and they begin to deal with some of Kaira's internal thoughts and doubts. We do this to build on the strength of Kaira's emotional maturity. She will eventually need all the emotional maturity she can muster to make the decision of her life. We now explode into action. Near the end, we are thrown into the scene where dire circumstances have led Kaira to the ultimate decision that she alone must make. The villainous Malthanis has set up a trap that has many outcomes. Kaira must decide the right one. One, she could accept the world has changed, and that it is actually for the better. Two, she could decide that the world must go back to its original state and save the human race, but at the cost of potentially killing her friends and all mutants. 3. She could save her friends and try another day. However, it will most likely be too late. And 4. She could save her father's AI brain and her friends at the risk of Malthanis expediting the change process. Narrative questions that drive the plot. The narrative questions that are asked throughout the story engage the audience to make their own decisions along the way. Kaira is faced with many questions that challenge her beliefs, morals, and her overall personae. Each question builds the foundation of her being. The racism thread. How should she handle racist people and their biases? The father thread. How should she think and feel about her father and the choices in his life? The inner conflict thread. Who is she? What does she believe in? And why her? The counter-objective villainous thread. How should she handle people who are against her and her motivations? The moment of truth thread. How should she handle the ultimate decision to save the world? As we discuss our story in terms of reasons why we watch movies, the first one we chose is voyeurism. In Skyfall, the audience is along for the ride. As Kira goes through her challenges, she develops an intimate relationship with the audience. They see what she sees. They feel what she feels. The feeling of a strange new world that neither her or the audience has ever seen. Although Kira lives in this world, she's never ventured very far from home. Role model to internalize. Kira is a role model most would say is righteous. Her internal drive to make things better is admirable. She only wants others to be the best they can be, yet she's confounded with her own thoughts. She knows that she'll step up to any situation that's called for her. However, she's not sure she can overcome the doubt. Throughout the story, we see Kira grow in confidence and emotional maturity. Each character in the story has a role to fulfill, and each role has a part in developing the depth of the story. Characters we can relate to and understand. Although Kiara is our main character, who's fearless and yet doubts her own decisions, there are other characters that the audience will relate to. Each character has their own set of morals and decision-making processes. From Ellie, who's a timid, small, and helpless soul, to the explosive beast she becomes in order to protect herself and the ones she loves. Each character has a lesson they can learn. Is our story emotionally engaging, driven towards a goal? In Skyfall, the drive of the storyline is to achieve many small goals that lead to one final and very important goal, to save the world. Along the way, we are exposed to different lessons learned. These lessons are from choices that each character will make in order to survive and make it to the next scene. The ultimate goal, to bring the Lazarus Cube to Earth's molten core, requires an immense amount of drive to overcome the obstacles that are in their way. Emotional. Kira, although very brave, has serious disbelief in herself and where she fits in. The story of her father, being a loving man, could never be there as much as she wanted, and she struggles to understand why. Now that he's dead, she has a lot of questions with no real answers. What sets her on her journey of emotional development and exploration is, we find out that her father was involved in a plan to save the world with a very complex piece of technology. She knows that something inside wants to finish her father's work and have closure. What she doesn't know is that her father was in her life more than she could ever imagine. Emotionally, at the end of the story, Kiera has closure regarding her father, but due to a decision she makes, she's now more alone than ever. High stakes. What could be more important than saving the world? In Skyfall, the world is changing and it does not look like it's for the better. Massive storms, violent earthquakes, happening with more frequency. Everything is riding on a potential solution Kiera's father developed. If Kiera and her friends can't finish the plan, the world may be doomed. Briefly summarize the concepts studied. Events of the story. Each event within a story plays a significant role in building the emotional connection between the story and the audience. For example, in the story of Wizard of Oz, each character has their own event that leads them to a final paramount scene where their storyline holds relevant meaning to the ending of the story. In Skyfall, this format will be followed. The intent will be on building each character and their purpose in the story. Threshold of awareness. In this story, the audience have a higher level of awareness than the characters. This allows for them to engage in the story by predicting outcomes. Most of the story is based on a game of cat and mouse. The characters themselves are unaware of the danger that lurks around the corner. However, the audience at times will be. Structural level. Within Skyfall, the blocks of the story are built by ensuring the feel of the environment established, and then by placing the characters in the scene that support the current plotline. Each character has their own perspective and plot that impacts the final decision for Kiera. Each of the different character storylines will build on each other to form a decision matrix that Kiera will use at the end of the story. Attention. In order not to lose the attention of the audience, throughout the story there are periods of rest, narrative questions, and new environmental impacts, puzzles, and much more to continually engage the viewer in some sort of activity that reduces the predictability of the situation. Directing the eyes and ears. Where do we want the viewers to look? Throughout the story, we find ways to portray the scene and highlight attributes of the story to ensure the viewer is in the moment, where they are completely immersed in the story and its world that we live in. A great example would be from the movie Avatar. During the scene of the ancient trees, the audience is surrounded by small, out-of-focus sparkles that give a sense of depth. Although the director wanted the audience to focus on the actions of these actors, he also wanted the viewers to feel like they were standing in a magical place. Reading significance. Throughout the story of Skyfall, the audience is introduced to various objects and situations where they hold more meaning than face value. For example, Kiera's mask has much more meaning than just cleaning air. Her father gave her the mask as a special gift. It therefore holds a symbolic connection to her father. It's also the key to saving the world as it activates the Lazarus Cube. So it also holds a symbolic connection to Kiera's father, where he believes that she's the most important thing in the world. Examples such as these provide the audience with a chance to imply reasoning to the scene that would otherwise need to be spoken. Constructing meaning. In Skyfall, everything from the current state of the environment to the way living beings treat each other has causality. Each example leads to the next. For example, because humans can no longer breathe air without the assistance of filtered mechanisms, they are now at a disadvantage and no longer the superior race on Earth. Something as simple as fresh air is now a rare resource where it was taken for granted so long ago. With the change to the atmosphere, all living things have been altered from their original state. Causality has forced everything to change in order to survive. Emotional responses. Throughout Skyfall, the audience is exposed to various heartfelt issues. For example, the relationship between Kiera and her father, the inequity of things such as race and gender, the skeptics and doubts of others. Each of these play a role in developing a relationship between the story and the audience. What relationship does each member of the audience have with their father? Have they ever felt racism or inequality? Have they ever been challenged with something that they know? Story evolution. The story starts with a dire situation that quickly builds into an epic resolution to save the world. Throughout the story, pieces of the plot begin to form an understanding of the cause. Each plot reveals complexity of the story. For example, Kiera's relationship with her father. Her memories of her father are good, but he was absent for a lot of her life. She resented him for that, although she knew that she loved him dearly. This left her feeling insecure and unwanted. Throughout the story, her understanding of him and what he was trying to do strengthens not only her understanding of him, but also her understanding of life itself. This brings us to the end of our story for Skyfall. Thank you.